To the polls on the 27th of October, former Deputy Chief Justice Dikgang Moseneke will share his report on whether free and fair local government elections can be held in the country amid the COVID-19 pandemic. The inquiry has received over 4,000 submissions from the general public, political parties, health experts and electoral role players. Moseneke must weigh the evidence and make a recommendation to the Electoral Commission. Well, for more on this story, let's cross now to my colleague Natasha Phiri, who's been following it closely. Thank you very much, Natasha. What can we expect?
Well, very good afternoon to you, Nompu, and of course to our SABC viewers. In less than an hour, I guess South Africans will know whether we'll be heading to the polls or not under these unprecedented times. We're just waiting for the man of the moment, and that is Justice Dikgang Moseneke, who of course was then recruited by the IEC and then tasked to investigate whether it is feasible to actually hold free and fair elections under this COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, he had hit the ground running when he had set up or established his inquiry in May, Nompu, and of course he solicited over 4,000 submissions. Some about 3,000 were written, and of course we heard those oral submissions that actually took place during the last week of July and the early week of the last week of June and the early week of July. And of course we had various experts coming through sharing their opinions, from health experts, from the Ministry of COGTA and various other political parties. But of course, if I'll just take you through a summary of who gave their inputs and what they had to say. On the first day of the inquiry, we heard the likes of Dr. Aslam Dasu and Fatima Hassan, and basically they were sharing the same sentiments, saying that the voter registration weekend and these elections would actually happen at a time or during the peak of the third wave. Of course, we saw that the voter registration of the 17th and the 18th of July, which was last week, was actually postponed to the 31st of July and the 1st of August, because of course it did happen under the peak of the third wave. We had Fatima Hassan warning that by the time that the country would actually head to the polls on October the 27th, Nompu, the majority of the people would not have been vaccinated, and we've seen our vaccination drives also being disturbed by those unrest that we saw last week, particularly in the provinces of KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. But moving to the various political parties, they had very differing opinions. Talking to the ANC, we heard the Deputy Secretary General Jesse Duarte saying and proposing that the polls be extended by 1 to 6 months from the date of the 27th of October. The EFF, no surprise there, we know that they've been calling for the amalgamation of the general elections and the local government elections to be held in 2024. But we heard the party leader there, Julius Malema, asking that the local government elections should be deferred until April next year. Moving to the Democratic Alliance, they've always held the view that the election should actually go ahead on the 27th of October. They're saying that everything must be done to actually stick to the regularity of the Constitution. As you know, that elections in this country actually take place every 5 years. They've also cited in times past that other countries like the United States, like Angola, had actually went to the polls under COVID-19 situations or the pandemic, and why can't we ourselves? The IFP, no surprise as well, which has been highly critical of the work of the Commission. Remember when the IEC had launched its election campaign this year early on the 9th of June under the banner of Every Voice Together, the IFP was highly critical of the IEC, saying that why is it that they would actually launch the elections before Justice Moseneke's report. They have been calling for the elections to actually be postponed till May next year. The likes of UDM calling for postponement as well, and various factors. So it would be quite interesting to hear from Justice Moseneke Moseneke in regards to whether he would postpone those elections or go ahead, as possible. But I mean, also the work of the IEC, as much as, we've seen this Delta variant ravage the lives and the livelihoods of people, it's also disrupted the calendar of the IEC. Nompu, the IEC could not hold its last installment of by-elections that was supposed to take place on the 30th of June. So people are just asking the same question, that would we then see a postponement in the October 27 polls?
Natasha, you've nicely explained that everything is so much up in the air and there's so much of a different view on how to proceed. But if you were a betting girl, what do you reckon the former Deputy Justice will decide?
No, you always like putting me on the spot, but I mean, just soliciting the views and hearing what the various different role players or stakeholders had to say to Justice Moseneke. They've been saying the majority of the calls have been around a postponement, so we are probably likely to hear that. If not, then I don't know. But in terms of, what needs to happen then now in terms of the legislative framework, according to our constitution, Nompu, especially as per section 159 of the Constitution Act 108 of 1996, under the terms of municipal councils, election is actually supposed to be held every 5 years, so it would be quite difficult right now. If Justice Moseneke says, listen, elections can't go ahead as planned, then the constitution, I beg your pardon, would then have to be amended. The matter would then be needed to be tabled or to be taken to the National Assembly and Parliament, and of course various other steps need to be followed. So it is quite a lengthy one, but of course I'll just leave it there to Justice Moseneke, to actually announce what will happen, whether or not the country will be going for the elections or not. With that said, it's back to you in studio, Nompu.
Thanks very much, my colleague there, Natasha Phiri. 7,209